We are back with another listener question here on the Brotherly Love Road Trip South Africa, yada yada podcast. I change the name every time.
Shout out Ron Sparkman for this
Yes.
question.
Who has asked us to share our aha moment that helped us unplug from the matrix of masculinity. You want to go first or should I?
I think you should go first if you have something, but I
Yeah,
I just
I do.
love Ron's phrasing of the matrix of masculinity
I
because
was just going to say
it
in the con. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is a matrix. It is like the matrix. Like
Oh, look at the other terminology we use too. Red pill. Oh, a
yeah,
cemetery.
the manosphere red
Yeah.
pill
Yeah.
people like to say, "Oh, you take the red pill like the movie The Matrix, and that's the one that like defies the order, and it makes you." That's when you're a really deep thinker that's broken out of the sheep
Yeah.
mindset or whatever. But in reality, when you take the red pill in real life, you just entrench yourself further into every single stereotype around manhood that is following the script,
Right.
which is the most sheep ass thing you could ever do. I'm sorry for cursing already, but
I'm not. I
anyway,
actually I uplift. I rescind your
yeah,
apology on your
that's the
behalf.
softest, most cheap, weak, fragile, insecure thing you can do is like I'm gonna play into every single stereotype
Yeah.
about masculinity.
So let's dive into the topic. So, all right. So the unplug moment. So I'll say for me, I could probably tell the story and it would take 20 minutes. So I'm going to bridge this as much as I can because we're trying to keep these to a workable length. So I started to unplug from the matrix and start to recognize what masculinity was doing to me, to my community, to other men when I lost my dad in the summer of 2020. That summer, I was moving from LA, from New York out to LA. It was also COVID summer, as we all know. To make the long story short, I get a phone call from my mother while I'm out in California. Uh, I don't answer it. She calls me back immediately. We are not a call twice family. We are planted to orbit a shared sun. That sometimes we are in alignment. And when she gave me that second call, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I like knew that it was going to be a thing, and I knew it was going to be a call to change my whole life, and it was. Turned out my father had been very ill, ended up in the hospital. He was now in the hospital. He would be there for 2 weeks. He was in a coma, and he would die. On his deathbed, in all of this, I found out he was an alcoholic. And this was something that I never knew, right? I had been alive in his world for 31 years. I had no clue. I had never heard about or seen this before. Just a complete surprise to me. And I didn't get to talk to him about it either because he died. He was unconscious the whole time. And it sets you on this huge path, first of like the grief and the way you rethink your family immediately. And then as I started to process that and understand, you start going, how did he end up like this? Like what happened that he turned, and obviously addiction has many causes. And I am in no way qualified to fully diagnose that. I also never saw him in any capacity where I have the ability to do that. But one thing we know for sure, and data backs this up, is that loneliness and a lack of social connection and community is a huge risk factor for addiction. I believe it increases the odds 50% that you will develop specifically alcohol dependency. And for my father, as some of you may remember, in the summer of 2020, right when individuals passed away, we were not doing in-person funerals. We were doing like Zoom memorials and things like that. My mother and I didn't want to do that. We did a Facebook Live. We just let people leave comments. And what I started to notice as I was reading the comments maybe a week later, it was my accountant. It was my best friend from back home. It was my best friend's dad. It was my mom's mahjong partner. It was their neighbor down here. With one or two exceptions, almost everybody who came through to remember my dad came through my mother. And I was like, where the hell are his ride or die, brother from another mother, call you on your BS, capital F friends? Not the guys he plays golf with or rides the train with, right? Because those are the soft social connections that make a society work, but aren't the places where you're being uplifted, being held, being able to be vulnerable, being celebrated, etc. I started to realize my dad did not have friends. He was
Mm,
completely socially disconnected. And then I started to think about, okay, well, what caused that? How could he be so disconnected from people? And again, to make a long story short, is like it is what we know about America. It's what we're told about American manhood. We're not vulnerable. We don't open up. We don't have real conversations. We sit side to side with our brothers, never face to face having real talk. And then compounding to that, the pressure of the roles men are supposed to play, which in a lot of cases my father did meet, but in others he did, and I think he was deeply insecure about, made it even harder for him to achieve any kind of like vulnerability or meaningful, personally driven connection with someone. And so, to summarize for me, it's like my that was my wake up moment to start saying, like, holy shit. Like these narratives we're telling ourselves about what men are supposed to do are pushing us to the absolute brink and then over the cliff.
Yeah.
And we are losing our lives because of it. And I do not want, what started for me is I don't want any other father and son to have the wedge between them that he and I experienced,
Mm,
has now just morphed into like, I do not want any man to have to experience what he did, to feel like he cannot have that type of expressiveness, to feel that isolated. Because I am so lucky to have such rich community in my life and to know that he didn't have that. My heart breaks for him.
right.
And so for me, that was my way out.
Wow. That's a powerful, powerful story, Jonathan. Thank you so much for
Thank you for being
sharing.
here to listen to it. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Wow. What a beautiful reflection. Those deaths are called deaths of despair. Deaths from addiction and loneliness, because men are much more likely to have substance abuse and addiction issues and suffer from that and pass away from it. We don't have just an opiate addiction. We have a largely like male opiate addiction problem in the U.S. The crisis. Um, and these deaths of despair come about because alcohol and drugs can be used as coping mechanisms for unmet emotional needs and sadness and pain that is inarticulable for most men, and then gets metastasized into something worse. Shows up in our bodies. That was a really beautiful story. One of my aha Matrix of Masculinity escape moments was uh, content and trigger warning around domestic violence, but I grew up in an abusive household, and I didn't ever acknowledge that or understand or realize it as such until I was maybe 21 or 22 years old, because I was so wrapped up under the spell of TV. When you have an abuser that's very makes you think that that is your normal and your reality, and or that you deserve that sort of treatment, or there's nothing wrong with that sort of treatment. So my dad was my mom, my sister, and my abuser, and um, there were some critical moments where, as I realized it at 21, 22, and I cut him out of my life because of this, I realized there were ways that he had not only like physically hurt, myself, my mom, and my sister, but he lied to me to my face about those things ever happening.
Mm.
And he would also, at that time, like when we were having this really big argument where I was kind of confronting him about some of these things he was lying about the circumstances in which he left, abandoned his family and left my mom and divorced her, and all this stuff. And he started getting really mad at me, and he would try to convince me that the only reason I was mad about it was because the women in our family had you wrapped around their finger. So for most of my life, but again, especially in this argument, but like for a long time during boyhood, my dad would try to gaslight me into believing the only reason I felt some type of way or I had an issue with his behavior, with the way that he could talk about my mom and my sister and their appearances, and women in general. The only reason I cared about that is because I'm too susceptible
Yes,
to
yes.
being influenced by women.
I just want to interject. My dad used to do the same thing to me. I have two half siblings, his stepchildren, and he always used to get mad at me when they would be around or when I would talk to me. Say, "You're too susceptible to them. You change to meet them. You are mean to me because of what they say to you." I'm like, "No, I'm mean to you because I want to be mean to you right now. I don't think you're behaving properly."
Yeah, yeah, that's so it's same thing. He's like, my dad would basically say the only reason why you're angry with me about this, or why you have a problem, is because women have told you, like, right? Whether it's,
Yeah.
he would say it's my grandmother, our neighbor, like even my auntie, but like he really tried to drive a wedge between me and the women in our family, um, because that would allow him to more easily control me and keep me in the matrix of masculinity. The idea that if you're a real man, you don't really care what women have to say, and you won't be so easily swayed, right? Because a real man wouldn't have a problem with, misogynistic language and talking about how much weight women have gained, all these disgusting things, right? Like if I was a real man, so that caused so much insecurity for me growing up. I'm like, man, why am I so sensitive about these things? I guess I'm not like a regular man. I guess I'm not a real man. I don't have what it takes. I'm not,
Mm.
and that hurt me deeply. Um, but those were some of my aha moments. Is literally seeing all of these contradictions in my dad's language and his narratives, around masculinity and how they tore my heart in two, basically, of like, I feel I must be this way because I want to be close with my own sister. I want to do what's right. I feel this is what's right in my heart. But on this other side is I want to, like, I feel compelled by staying in my dad's good graces or being in the club of real manhood or whatever. So those were some aha moments, but I'm so grateful that I did, uh, yeah, split off from him and
It's
free
so
myself.
crazy as we continue to have these conversations over the past day or so, how much overlap, even in our stories that we did, as much as we knew each other already, how overlap there is in our stories that we didn't know about before. Like all these little things that are just these common activities that these figures have continued to exert and do in our lives. It's sad. Well, Ron, thank you so much for the question. If you all want to drop your comments in the comments, they're all amazing. See y'all later.
Bye.